So this morning we are continuing our series on parenting and building resilient kids. And I just wonder how many of you, when you were growing up, that part of your discipline that your parents gave you, how many of you were spanked as a kid? Oh my gosh, the whole place. Don't you know that that's evil? That's what we hear anyway, right? I really am really concerned that we live in an age where we've redefined what parenting is, and I believe that there's a direct result of that differing philosophy of parenting that is ruining or challenging the development of the lives of our young adults today. And so I wanted to start out by just kind of addressing a couple of the parenting methods that we hear about in the media. And so one of them is called helicopter parent. Have you ever heard of that? Being a helicopter parent? This is a fairly old term. There are some newer ones, but this is a fairly old term. And so there have been some studies that have been done. Now, I do want to say this, that helicopter parenting is appropriate at some stage. So my granddaughters, Allie and Maddie are here today. Maddie's a year and a half old. So Maddie is old enough that she can walk around, run. In fact, I can't run fast enough to catch her, okay? So it's like we have to be very careful because you can't take your eyes off Maddie. I mean, in 5 minutes or 5 seconds, she'll have her finger in a light socket or be spilling something or put something in her mouth, So she's like, it's like life and death for, all the time. You just have to be very careful. But once they get older, it can really have some negative side effects if parents continue to be helicopter parents. And so here are some of the side effects that I found as I did some research this week. People that helicopter parent their children, they lack resilience. They can't bounce back from challenges. If done frequently over time, this can reduce their natural ability to succeed using their own what? Own initiative. I mean, that's really important that they would be able to do that. In 2018, a study in developmental psychology found that parents who are overly controlling, and you can raise your hand if you're overly controlling, says that you can impair your child's ability to regulate emotions and behavior. That you can actually impair their development by being overly controlling. Other studies have found that kids who experienced helicopter parenting had inflated a sense of self and impulsivity. And so if you're trying to produce a child that's going to be resilient, that's going to be healthy, that's going to be an overcomer, then this is probably not the best tactic to do that. The other term that I wanted to talk about is called lawnmower parenting. Have you ever heard of that? Lawnmower parenting. So here are some of the signs of lawnmower parenting. It's when you're micromanaging their life, when you're interfering, when you're arranging, and this is a big one, when you're not allowing your child to deal with their own conflicts. There's one thing I love about my daughter Faith, when her kids, who are like, I think 2 and 4, when they get into an argument and they're fighting over a toy, they just scream and jerk the toy out of each other's hand. Well, that's what kids do, right? And so then she says, use your words. She doesn't say, give it back. She doesn't say, you guys need to share. She says, use your words. What do you want? You need to learn how to talk about what you want. And so Noah will say, well, I want that toy. And then Hannah will say, okay, you can have it for a little while. But until they've had that conversation, they don't even understand what each other wants. They're just, basically reacting on their basic instincts for what they want. So she makes them have a conversation. And so when parents that are lawnmower parents are asked, why do you do this? Here were their answers. They said it was to protect their child from failure, disappointment, discomfort, and adversity. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Huh? Yeah, because there's going to be real life, They're going to have to face those things as they grow up. And if we don't give them the tools, they're going to be crushed under the weight of everything that's going on around them. Melissa always gets to tell me these stories because she works at the at the elementary school. And so I don't get names. I don't want to know the names, but I just want to know, I like hearing these stories. So she comes home one day and she said, this was last year. She said, one of the kids went home to their parents and said they didn't want to ride the bus anymore. And so, mom and dad are like, well, why don't you want to ride the bus anymore? Well, there's kids picking on me and, I don't like it. I just feel like I'm not in place. I don't fit in or whatever the excuses were. And so then the parent faces two choices. And I think all of us who have been parents, we've faced this choice. Choice one is to call the school and complain that your kid's getting picked on and talk about how the bus driver's siding with everybody else and, we're the victim in this situation. Or the second option is to try to figure out what really happened. And so this family decided to find out what really happened. And it just so happens that they go to the school with the student, elementary student, and the administrator says, well, here, let's watch the videotape from the school bus. Well, the kid didn't know that there was a videotape on the school bus. So they play the tape, and this little boy is running all over the bus, not sitting in his seat, causing all kinds of problems. And so he knew he was in big trouble. Now, when you guys were young and you got in trouble at school, what happened at home? You got in trouble at home, right? If you got in trouble at school, you got in trouble at home. And that's exactly what happened in this case. But often, what a helicopter parent would do, what a lawnmower parent would do, is they would chew the school out for allowing this child to be in this situation in the first place. And it does no good for the child. And so I want to talk about, what does the Bible say about discipline? What does the Bible say about discipline? Yeah, spare the rod, spoil the child. I want to give you a few verses from Proverbs 13, but we're going to mostly look at Proverbs 13, verse 24. And so Proverbs 13, verse 1 says this: a wise son heeds his father's instruction, but a mocker does not respond to rebukes. Now, how many of you have ever been to a restaurant or to a Walmart or to some store and somebody's kid is not listening and they're saying, don't touch that or don't do that, and they say it 50 times and they just keep doing it? Have you ever seen that happen? And it's like, in your mind, and I know that you're thinking the same thing I'm thinking, why don't they do something about that besides talk? Because talk is what? Talk is cheap, right? And so when you guys were little, since most of you raised your hand and said you got spanked, if you were acting up really bad in a restaurant or in a store and you wouldn't listen, what'd your parents do? They took you out to the car, didn't they? They took you out to the car. They didn't give in. They didn't say, well, you get your way because I don't want the whole store to think that, we're mean parents. They just quietly walked you out to the car and then beat your butt in the car. But it says that a mocker does not respond to rebukes. We have the choice on whether our children become mockers. we have to do something about it sometimes. Verse 14 says, the teaching of the wise is the fountain of life, turning a person from the snares of what? Death. Do you believe that? That you can actually save your child's life by giving them wisdom? I do. I think that's true. Verse 15 says, good judgment wins favor, but the way of the unfaithful leads to their destruction. And then this is one of my favorites. Walk with the wise and you will become what? Walk with the wise and you will become wise. You know, it'd be cool if every one of you guys who have kids under your influence could just say that to those kids 3 times a week until it's embedded in their mind. Now, they might not even know what it means until they get older, but they will always say, Grandma or Grandpa or Mom and Dad always said, walk with the wise and you will become wise. And the first time they get in trouble in middle school, guess what? They're going to figure out exactly what that meant. Walk with the wise and you will become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Here's the last one, the one I want to really focus on. Verse 24 says this, whoever spares the rod, what? Hates his children, or hates their children. But the one who loves their children is careful to do what? Discipline them. And so, let's talk about that. I mean, we're in a world today where people are kind of afraid to discipline. I think now, if you're in a store and your child's acting up, there's a good chance that if you spank them on the butt in front of other people, you could have the police called on you. You know? You could have somebody irately berating you for punishing your kid. And so we have to be careful about that. But I don't think he's saying, I know he's not saying, that you should beat your kids. I think that is clear cut. In fact, we need to acknowledge that child abuse is real, isn't it? Child abuse is real. That, in fact, what I would say is this, that there are so many parents that have had their own rough way to go. They have never really grown up. They've never been disciplined correctly. So they're not working with the resources that many of you are working with. And so they might just be reacting out of anger or reacting out of frustration instead of being able to handle it correctly. And so child abuse is awful, and it's something that we need to work on. And so one of the things I did this week was I just Googled, what does James Dobson say about spanking? What does James Dobson say about spanking? How many of you guys know who James Dobson is? Okay, if you don't know, you need to look him up. Look up James Dobson. Focus on the Family is the organization. And they have all kinds of great videos on parenting and how to do that. But here are some of the rules that James Dobson says about spanking. Number 1, he says, spanking should always be motivated by love and with the purpose of teaching and correcting, never for revenge. And so then I wanted to know, well, at what age do kids know what no means? At what age do kids know what no means? So before Shirley puts the answer up, what do you think the answer is? When do kids know what no means? 2, 1, 6 months, 6 to 18 months. In fact, I was listening to a podcast this week of a lady who was a child psychologist, and she had a little baby. The baby was 6 months old, I think, and they didn't want the baby going into the kitchen. So they put a blue tape line on the kitchen floor, and every time that they came to the tape line, they would just say no, lovingly say no, and they would carry the child back away from the tape line. Within just a few days, that child would come right to the tape line and stop because it understood the word no. No harsh punishment was used. It was just reinforced over and over. And so there's my little one. Maddie, what's wrong? She's exercising her free will. That's what that is. She's exercising her free will. And so the second rule was this. He said spanking is inappropriate before 15 months. The before 15 months, they don't really understand what's going on, and so it doesn't do any good, and it might actually do some damage just to their understanding of love and those kinds of things. The third rule was this. It should be less necessary after 6 years. Did your parents spank you like till you were older? I mean, I really feel like, and I don't remember what Mom and Dad did. All I remember is that we had a paddle, a wooden paddle. It was in the kitchen drawer, and it had the words Board of Education right on it. And I think it had signatures. It had signatures of kids that had been spanked by it, because I think it was it like grandma's in school when she was a teacher? So kids had been spanked by that board for years. And so Mom would say, you've had it. You've pushed me too far. You've done enough. And so then she would make us go out to the kitchen, get the paddle out of the drawer, and then she would say, put your hands on the bar. Well, that, you knew it was over then. You're in big trouble. So we'd put our hands on the bar, and then she'd spank us on the butt. And so, I think within those rules, we need to understand that it can be an effective part of discipline as long as it's never done in anger. As long as it's never done with malintent, it's got to be done out of love. But there are some alternate methods that may work better. And I know that you guys have used some of these, but I would say timeout is a huge deterrent. That taking away privileges is a huge deterrent. Now, I'll just say, and Melissa will confirm this, that when we were raising our 3 kids, spanking did not work for Tyler. It did not work. He would much rather be spanked and go about his business than be in timeout or have something taken away. And he loved playing Nintendo and Xbox and all these things. So it worked much better to take away things that he wanted or to make him go into timeout for a while rather than spanking. And there was one time, I think I've told this story before, when he was older, he was like in his teen years, and whenever he'd get in big trouble because he wasn't taking out the trash like we asked him, or he wasn't doing his homework like he was supposed to because he was playing Xbox, then what we'd say, we'd give him a couple chances. Okay, you need to get your homework done. Well, 15 minutes later, he's still playing the Xbox. So then it's, all right, now I'm giving you one last chance. You got 10 minutes. Then you need to put that thing away, and you need to start working on your homework. He still wouldn't do it. And so we just go in and take the power cord, out of the wall, take it out of the Xbox and take it with us and say, you can have it back. Well, one time, I remember this so vividly. He decided that he wasn't going to listen to us. I think he was 16, something like that. Maybe not that old. But he was big. I mean, he's a big boy. And so he just decided he was going to slam the door shut and lock it and keep playing the Xbox. He wasn't going to listen to us. So I just went downstairs, opened up the control panel to the electric, turned off the whole power to the whole upstairs. Man, he came out of there like a lightning bolt. He was so upset. But I knew that whenever it came to the battle, that the battle had to be won, right? That the moment that we stop fighting, we set a precedent, don't we? And so one of the things that Scripture tells us, Proverbs 29, verse 15 says this, a rod and a reprimand impart wisdom, but a child left undisciplined disgraces his mother. I believe that's true. Verse 17 says this, discipline your children, and they will give you peace. They will bring you the delights you desire. And so I want to ask this question and just shout out your answers, but why do you think it is that parents don't want to discipline their kids? Fear. Huh? Fear. Fear? Sure, yeah. Fear of what?
Having their kids taken away.
Okay, that's one I didn't think of. So did you hear that? She said fear that somebody might complain and try to, make a report with child services, right? I mean, that's a real thing that happens. What else? What's that?
Dad always said that we raised a generation of lazy parents.
Okay, so lazy parenting, just don't want to do it, yeah?
You don't want to be grounded. When your kids are grounded, you're grounded.
That's true. It's suffering, right? It's suffering for all of us. Here are 3 things that I think are big factors in our not wanting to discipline. Number 1, and Melissa and I talked about this week, that parents fear the fit. They fear the tantrum, that they don't want to put up with the misery that's going to come with that battle. And so it's just easier to let the kid do whatever they want or whatever's within reason as long as it's not dangerous. And so the reality is parenting is really difficult, isn't it? Good parenting is really difficult. My youngest daughter, Hope, hasn't had any kids yet. So we were out there visiting about 2 weeks ago, and I said, one thing's for sure, because they want to have kids. I said, one thing's for sure. If you have kids, it will completely, 100% test your emotional and your mental stability. I mean, if you want tested on how much you can handle, have kids. Because it is an all-out fight almost every day of your life. I'd say, the way I say it is, you've got about from 0 to 25, okay? That's about how many years it takes for them to kind of get completely on their feet. And so there's a teacher at school that says this phrase, don't fear the fit. Don't fear the fit. Can you say that with me? Don't fear the fit. That means that when your kid knows that they can throw a fit and get their way, that you just put your foot down, you decide they're not running the show, that you're not going to allow that to be the case. And I love this story by Jordan Peterson. He said that when his little boy was young, he was very strong-willed. Well, mine was too. He said that his little boy was very strong-willed, so he would say, and here's how he would say it. He would say, I want you to go sit on the steps until you can become a reasonable human being, you know? And so his little boy would go sit on the steps, and he said for a while when he was younger, you might have to hold him there because he's just going to keep running off. But eventually, you'll get him to learn that he's not going to run off, that he's going to stay on those steps until he decides to be a reasonable person. And so he said sometimes he would always like yell out to his little boy, he'd say, are you ready to rejoin the family? Are you ready to be a reasonable human being? And sometimes he would say, no, I'm not, like that. And he would say, okay, well, just sit there. And so eventually he would calm down and he would come back out and join the family. And he said he would give his son a big hug. There would be immediate forgiveness for whatever tantrum he was having, and they would start back over. Now let me tell you something. That is an invaluable set of tools that you're giving that child, because they're going to need those tools for the rest of their life. To be able to self-regulate, to be able to self-control, to be able to take your own time out. How many of you guys need a time out at least once a week? Don't you? I mean, we put ourselves in time out because we need that. And so we've got to be able to teach that to our kids. Here's the second thing, I think. So the first one is that they fear the fit. The second reason is because they want to be liked by their child. You think that's true? That people want to be liked by their child, so they're like, well, I'm not going to enforce the rules, or I'm not going to be too hard on them. I mean, there was a time when Melissa and I were young parents that I felt like almost 90% of my interactions with my kids were don't do that, don't do this, quit that, stop that, I'm going to spank your butt. I mean, I felt like it was all negative. And I didn't want it to be negative, but I also felt like that was the path we were on, not because I had chosen that path, but because they were being just kids, you know? And so sometimes we just, I think, choose to be liked. And so here's the question I think we need to ask ourselves. Do we want to be liked now, or do we want to be liked when our kids are 25? Because I'm going to tell you something. Your kids are not going to like you when you're 25 if you've spoiled them when they're 5. They're not going to like you. In fact, they're probably going to act like they're victims of the world and they need everything handed to them, and you're the enemy because you're no longer doing it. So if you want your kids to like you when they're 25, then you have to maybe not let them like you sometimes when they're younger. And the other thing that I think is really huge is that you might want other people to like your kids when they're out in public. And if your kids go to school, and if your kids, act up every time you're at the restaurant or every time you're in Walmart, people tend to kind of make a space around you or avoid you because your kids are acting out. One of the things that Jordan Peterson said was, he said, listen, if my kid is being so bad that I don't like him and he's my kid, then other people are going to hate him because they don't have any reason. I mean, they're not related. And so it's like we've got to pay attention to that. Last night, and I don't know if you guys would agree with this or not, but last night, I think God gave me this idea that love equals limits. Does that sound right? That love equals limits. But so the difference between like and love is that love equals limits. Like equals what's easy at the time. What's easy at the time. In fact, I would say this, that wanting to be liked is more about you as a parent than it is about the kid. Because you want the easy track now so that you can go about your day. So you might let them watch more TV or eat the extra sweets or do whatever to keep from having to fight about that. That's not about them. That's about you. It's about you wanting it to be easier, wanting to be liked, but it's not love. Here's the last one. I think sometimes parents are overreacting to their own abusive or strict upbringing. Josh McDowell says something I really think is important. He says, rules without relationship equal rebellion. Did any of you guys have a really strict upbringing that was a lot of rules but not much relationship? Did you have some of that? That can really damage how we understand our loving relationships with each other. And so, I feel like it's a battle that sometimes we're not willing to fight. I think it's a battle that if you're going to be a parent, that you need lots of support, lots of help, some grandparents or some friends. There might be some times, and I remember this when we were in Kentucky. There was a time when I almost lost it. I was like so frustrated. My anxiety was through the roof. I was angry. Everything was going wrong. And we called Melissa's parents. And basically, I think Melissa just said, Brian's about to lose it, get down here. I think that's that's pretty much what she said. And within a few hours, took I forget, 7 hours or something to get down there. They came down and they relieved us from the kids for a while. Sometimes we need that, don't we? I mean, I don't think any of you are so amazing and solid that you don't need some extra help with some of those tough times. And so we've got to have that support system. Let's stand. We'll get ready to have the worship team come on up. One of the last things I want to tell you about, this bothered me. In some studies that have been done, Jordan Peterson writes about how a child that's not socially able to interact with other kids, they won't share, they demand their own way. What happens is those kids at a very young age, they become isolated. Other kids don't want to play with them. Other kids avoid them. They become outcast. Once they become outcast and they continue to grow up and they still have that, idea of what's right for them, and no one's there to help them correct that, they just get farther and farther behind socially until they're rejected by most of their peers. That happens because we haven't helped them to adjust and to grow and to learn. And that's what I hope that we can begin to do with kids in our culture and in our community of faith. So let's pray. Father God, I just pray that you would give us wisdom, that you would help us to never get tired of the fight, to never fear the fit, to never choose being liked over loving our kids and having limits. And Lord, that because of that, we would raise up a generation of kids that are resilient, that fight battles, that get up when they get knocked down. And Lord, that they would someday love us for the cost that we paid to make them into awesome men and women. So Lord, give us strength in these days.